Chapter 20, The Piano Begins. The situation of Qing Yuan Bafu is getting worse day by day, and Yan Lin is clear as a son of a noble family. The fact that this uncle's concubine fell into the water at the Chongyang banquet that day is also well known, not to mention Zhang Sunning's shocking sentence at that time. The mother-in-law punished the girl, and the slave bullied the master. Qing Yuan Bafu's face is lost. It's just to avoid gossip from others, saying that their uncle treats the concubine harshly, and naturally he doesn't dare to embarrass this concubine on the surface, but he is afraid that there will be a lot more hardships in secret. He is the only concubine in the Yanji Marquis mansion, and he is very favored in the palace, and all kinds of selfish methods in the back house cannot fall on him. But I have never eaten pork and seen pigs run. What are some fights like in the back house? Yan Lin still understands. After all, the father also has a concubine and concubines. He felt that Ning Ning was too attentive to the concubine of the Bafu who met in Pingshui, and couldn't help but persuade her, "You are too kind-hearted, and there are many people in the world who are so stupid and clumsy and do not fight for themselves. It's just a matter of saving people. Is it possible to expect her to be reborn? You must know that people's situations have a reason, and if she has the ability, she will not fall into the previous fate." Zhang Suning retracted her gaze and said, "Because she saved herself, she should care more than ordinary people, and I hope she is better. But you're right, I've done my duty, so where can I do more?" With that, she exhaled softly. It seems that he wants to relieve a certain unpleasant feeling in his heart. Then he said to Yan Lin, "Let's go in and see the piano." The hidden pavilion, as you hear the name, knows that this pavilion is specially designed for the piano. Although the location is in the bustling city, it can be regarded as the boundary of every inch of land in the capital, but you must go down the stairs to the second floor from the inconspicuous downstairs on the street to see the elegant and plain bamboo plaque. The word "secluded" is written on the bamboo in pure ink. Just because the piano is an elegant thing, the guests who come to Xiangqin, those who fake love the piano should be elegant, and those who really love the piano are not lively, so this kind of decoration and style can just take into account. Yan Lin obviously didn't come here for the first time, and Zhang Suning walked in. In front of the incense burner in the corner, a man dressed as a writer is holding an incense spoon and plucking incense. It was burned with the finest incense. There is a faint scent of incense floating throughout the secluded pavilion. When the scribe heard the footsteps, he turned his head, and when he saw that it was Yan Lin, he smiled, only put down the incense spoon gently, and walked to the copper basin next to him to clean his hands, and said, "The prince is here. I wondered if you didn't come again, I'd hang up and sell those pianos." Yan Lin smiled, "Anyway, in the piano hall, can you collect this copper smell?" The scribe didn't care about it, and only said, "Are you doing good deeds when I open a piano hall? Playing a piano, bathing, washing hands, burning incense, and having a good piano, what kind of items does not cost you?" Zhang Suning only felt that this person was strange, and couldn't help but look at it a few more times. The scribe was thin and ordinary looking, and he also glanced at Zhang Suning, and came to his senses. "It's this girl who wants Xiangqin, right?" Zhang Suning didn't speak. Yan Lin said angrily, "Don't talk nonsense, where is the piano I want?" The scribe's eyebrows raised slightly, and he easily felt that Yan Lin was unusual, so he didn't withdraw his gaze, but looked at Zhang Suning a few more times, and then turned around and walked into the inner room, took out the 4 pianos hidden in them one by one, and lined them up on the long case in the hall, and then untied the piano bags outside one by one, and asked Yan Lin to come up and see. "Originally, I found 5 pianos, and one of them was newly made by Zhongninggu Benaiyuan, but it was too late, and when my people went, Gu Benyuan had already given the new qin to Xie. Gu Benyuan is now the most famous violinist. Generally speaking, the process of cutting the qin is very cumbersome. From the selection of wood to the string test, it takes at least 1 year to make a piano, and it takes more than 2 or even 3 years to make a meticulous and elaborate work. The luthier is considered a craftsman and makes a living from it. Of course, one piano will starve to death in 2 years, so many luthiers will prepare wood and make 10 or 20 pianos at the same time, so that although the process of making a violin still takes 2 years, 2 years can produce a lot of luthiers. But Gu Benyuan is more than 60 years old this year, and he is about to reach the age of antiquity, and his energy is no better than that of those young luthiers, and he can no longer make many pianos at the same time, so he only produces 1 or 2 pianos in 2 or 3 years. At the time, people preferred to pursue scarce things. In the past 2 years, there have been countless people who have begged for the piano, but no one expected that this new piano has not been revealed once, and the sound has not yet leaked a wisp, and the old man actually gave it directly to Xie. I don't know how many people secretly gritted their teeth. Yan Lin practiced martial arts, not an icon, but after hearing Gu Benyuan's reputation, he was stunned for a while. Give it. For nothing. The scribe finally revealed a little dissatisfaction, sneered, but turned to a little schadenfreude. Didn't the king of Pingnan assassinate the imperial court officials in the capital a while ago? Xie cut a piano for 3 years, and that day I chose a few good strings here, and was about to take advantage of the leisure to wear a good audition, but on the way back, I somehow went up to that floor and met the rebel party. People are fine, but a new string has not been put on, but someone has chopped it with a knife. Tisk, I was stunned, I was angry. We don't know. Anyway, I heard that he didn't go to the court for 2 days. After Gu Benyuan knew about this, he asked someone to send the qin from Jiangning to the capital to give it to him. Isn't this upside down? Yan Lin said, You don't care about the qin, do you? The scribe snorted coldly, If my daughter buys a piano, I will dare to double it and sell it to you. Xie will cut off Lao Tzu's wealth. Ahem. Yan Lin coughed, and wanted to say, Does this Shiza look like that kind of deceitful wrongdoer, but after thinking about it, he still didn't answer. Xie is the young master of the crown prince, and now he is presiding over the banquet in the palace, and he is half a gentleman. The other party is different. This scribe is the owner of the secluded pavilion, originally a jinchi in the same department as Xie, and he is also a person from Jinling, surnamed Lu Mingxian, and the words are hidden. All the way up to the examination, Xie was the first to be the second, Xie was the second, Xie Huiwen was the second, and even when he entered the Hanlin Academy, he had to be crushed. At the time, everyone joked that Xie Lu Er. Lu Xian is a poor family with a strong temper. The more he can't compare, the more he has to compare with Xie, and he is quite strong. Unexpectedly, once the funeral report came to Jinling, Xie went home to mourn for 3 years. Lu Xian suddenly became the first, but he felt that there was no interest in the Hanlin courtyard. After staying for a year, he resigned directly. I heard that it seems that I also went back to Jinling. 4 years ago, Xie returned to the imperial court because of the support of the current Saint Shen Lang, and now he is an official, at least a teacher. Lu Xian seems to have lost interest in his career. Although he also returned to the capital, he actually opened a piano shop to sell pianos, like an idle cloud and wild crane. It is simply unheard of for people who have entered Hanlin to engage in this kind of business. Some old acquaintances in Beijing can't believe it and come to patronize it. It didn't take long for this piano hall to become famous in the government and the opposition. Of course, gradually some people found that compared with being an honest official, Lu Xian was unambiguous when he became a profiteer, and secretly there was a saying, called Jinqi sells pianos, if you don't buy it, you can't do it, which shows how dark the business is. In other words, Lu Xian and Xie Wei are old acquaintances who have dealt with each other, and a Xie Juan is quite polite, but Yan Lin was taught by Xie Wei, but he had to weigh the word respect and inferiority. He looked at the 4 pianos in front of him and asked, "What about these?" Lu Xian introduced it one by one, but most of the eyes were on Zhang Suning throughout the whole process, and many words were also said to her, obviously knowing where the focus of today's business was. It's just that Zhang Suning really doesn't love the piano. When she was learning the piano in the last life, all the nobles of the family were riveted to show their faces in front of Xie Wei, but she was bitter and tired, relying on her own Yan Lin in the early stage, and Shen Zhu in the later stage. She didn't listen to him a few times at all. If you want to ask her which of these pianos she likes, she was tempted to answer, "I don't like a single one." Fortunately, Yan Lin knew that she didn't learn the piano in the house before, so after thinking about it, she asked for the gukun more than 300 years ago, called jiaoan. Due to perennial weathering and playing vibration, the body of the piano has been covered with a piece of flowing water and broken lines, with thick scattered sounds and clear overtones. It's just that the price is scary. Lu Xian smiled slightly and gave Yan Lin 3 fingers, and Zhang Suning gasped. Yan Lin regarded it as ordinary, asked someone to pay for the silver ticket, and then put the piano bag on and handed it to Zhang Suning, saying, "Although you entered the palace to accompany the princess, Mr. Xie is also generous to others, but in terms of learning and piano, you will not be spared gently because you are a girl. Listening to Mr. Xie's lectures, you must be in good spirits. He didn't play the piano often in the palace, but I was lucky enough to smell it a few times, and it was excellent. If you don't want to learn the piano in the past, you must be a bad teacher who teaches the piano. When I entered the palace this time, I might like it. Therefore, a good piano is a must." But when Zhang Suning heard his words, the corners of her eyes twitched slightly. No one knows why she didn't want to learn the piano after entering Beijing, just because of Xie Wei. On the way to Beijing 4 years ago, Xie Wei held the piano. She also thought that this person was really a distant relative of the Zhang mansion, wearing a white cloth robe, with nothing but a piano, and looking sick. Although he rode in the same car with her, he didn't like to deal with people, and most of the time he closed his eyes and recuperated, only occasionally stopping to rest in the middle. He would stroke the piano. Zhang Suning didn't understand, and she didn't like him. At that time, she knew her life experience, and knew that there was a sister in the family who was praised by everyone, and along the way she was afraid of being looked down upon by the servant woman who came to pick her up in Beijing, although she had not learned any rules, but because of the fear in her heart, she wanted to put on a posture of a young lady, for that humble and pitiful self-esteem. The eldest lady is all high and commanding. Therefore, she is also condescending to others and commanding others, and this others includes Xie Wei. She grew up in the countryside and didn't learn any rules, but she had rules for walking, sitting and lying down, whether it was the posture of lifting the spoon when eating together, or the slightest confusion when she rested in the carriage, it made her uncomfortable. At that time, she felt that this person was shabby, but he was still holding it. It was a long time before I was willing to admit that the reason why she was uncomfortable was because even if she didn't understand it, she could feel the difference. And this difference is the difference between a woman who grew up in the countryside at that time and the prosperous capital she is about to arrive. But people are always reluctant to admit it. Even if she became a queen later, she didn't want to see Xie Wei, and Xie Wei's name was always connected with Qin, and she didn't want to see Qin even with her. The most frightened and unbearable time in her life was seen by this person, and as long as she saw this person, she would think of those pasts. And this is what she was most taboo in the previous life. Who knows what Xie Wei thought of her at that time? Today's Queen Mother was a country girl who didn't look like a prince in a dragon robe. As long as I think about it, I feel embarrassed, so Zhang Xuning has never thought that this past does not exist. Xie Wei, who is insightful, probably knows what she thinks. Even if he has a very high status in the government and the opposition and frequently enters and leaves the court, he rarely appears in front of her and never mentions it. As for the scar on her wrist, she asked the imperial doctor to prescribe a prescription, carefully applied the medicine for 2 years, and it was clean. At this moment, the fragrance in the hall is thick. The fragrance is far away and calms people's minds. Zhang Xuning blinked, lowered her eyes and looked at the banana nunnery that was handed over to her, and suddenly thought, if it weren't for Zhang Sha, perhaps, she would die and be buried in the soil, and she wouldn't mention it to anyone. She also had the grace of feeding blood to Xie Wei. But it seems that after the palace changed in the previous life, Xie Wei had blood on his hands, and he never touched the piano again. Chapter 21, Yu Fangyan's owner. A piano costs 3,000 taels, and Yan Lin didn't blink his eyes when he paid for it. The thick background of the Yanji Marquis mansion can be seen. In the past, she was ignorant that Yan Lin was good to her as a matter of course, and she also enjoyed Yan Lin's good to herself as a matter of course, but after she was reborn, she knew that she couldn't afford to be a young man's sincere liking, and she shouldn't take this good as a matter of course. She shouldn't have taken this piano. But when he was about to refuse, he asked Tanger to take the silver ticket to pay for the door. Zhang Xuning suddenly hesitated again, and after a change of heart, he actually suppressed the idea of the first talent, and accepted the piano silently. Then Lu Xian took the money and lit the silver tickets one by one, with a smile on his whole face, and only said to Yan Lin, I know that the little marquis is the most generous, there are so many customers in the capital, and Lu Zayin is the most happy to see you. Come to me, whatever you want, keep it and don't let the little marquis run for nothing. Yan Lin rolled his eyes. Zhang Xuning was stunned, almost unable to believe her ears. Lu Zayin. Isn't that Lu Xian, one of Xie Wei's most powerful henchmen when he later launched the palace rebellion? Yan Lin is in charge of the soldiers, and Lu Xian is in charge of the money. Later, Yan Lin was the commander of the Forbidden Army, and Lu Xian was promoted by Xie Wei when she was imprisoned in the palace, and became the first person to become a merchant and an official from business, and became the new head of the household department. In the previous life, Yu Fangyan donated 80% of his wealth to the imperial court to fill the treasury in order to save his life, and it was this person who took care of it. When he first advanced to this secluded pavilion, Yan Lin did not introduce the identity of the owner here, until Lu Xian inadvertently confided his name and surname, which made Zhang Xuning stunned, and got a glimpse of a clue that Yan Lin could not see. At this time, when I looked at Lu Xian again, I felt completely different. Just now, I only thought that this person's words were bold and presumptuous, and the business was very interesting, but now when I look at it, I feel that this kind of boldness and presumptuousness may not be without a bit of arrogance, and everyone is drunk and I am sober and detached. Lu Xian finished counting the silver ticket, nodded with satisfaction, and easily put the silver ticket into his arms. The count is correct. Yan Lin said, then we will leave. A big business of 3,000 taels is not always available. Lu Xian vividly interpreted the shrewdness of a Philistine businessman, and with a smile on his face, he personally sent the two of them to the door. Zhang Xuning followed behind Yan Lin and went downstairs with the Qin in her arms. Unexpectedly, a person came up from downstairs and bumped into them. At first glance, it was the sword book beside Xie Wei. Her eyelids jumped. Jianshu often follows Xie Wei's side, and has learned a good swordsmanship. Yan Lin has seen him and knows him, and when he saw him, he said, "Mr. Xie is running errands with you again." Jianshu saluted him and smiled, "Exactly." After saying that, he turned his eyes and saw Zhang Xuning following behind him, and the footsteps that were about to continue to go up stopped again, and saluted her, "Hello, second Miss Ning." Zhang Xuning was slightly stunned and returned the salute. Yan Lin suddenly raised his eyebrows when he heard this, felt a subtlety, and glanced at the sword book with a slightly strange gaze. "What is the name of second Miss Ning?" But Jianshu didn't seem to feel that something was wrong, so he hurriedly went upstairs after saluting. In the secluded pavilion, Lu Xian was just about to close the door, pour himself a glass of wine, and celebrate the sale of such an expensive piano, but as soon as he put his hands on the door, he saw the sword book coming. The corner of his eye twitched, and he immediately quickened his movement to close the door. Unexpectedly, Jianshu's eyes were fast, and he directly stepped forward and stuck his palm in the crack of the door, and smiled at Lu Xian. "The sky is still bright, why is Mr. Lu in such a hurry to close the door?" Lu Xian scolded in his heart, "If you practice martial arts, you really have rough skin and thick flesh, why didn't you kill you?" But his face was already surprised, as if he had just seen the sword book, and he smiled very affectionately, "Ah, the sword book. Isn't this not that I didn't see you? How about it, your master broke a piano and died of anger at home." Jianshu couldn't help but darken his face, "Don't worry about Mr. Lao Lu." The schadenfreude in Lu Xian's eyebrows floated up again, and said, "What do you want to buy?" Jianshu said, "Don't buy anything, there's something." Lu Xian's face changed when he heard this, and he immediately pushed out his hand that was blocking the door, and said categorically, "I don't have any money, you leave quickly." Jianshu didn't move. "Didn't Yan Ziahe just leave?" Lu Xian lied without blinking, "That piano is not worth much." Jianshu smiled coldly, put his hand down, and made a gesture to leave. "Then I'll go back and tell Mr. that on your account 3 months ago, there was an incorrect account of 5,000 taels." Hey, rich. Lu Xian hurriedly grabbed him without saying a word and dragged him into the house. "Really, you said that you are not very old, what is the meaning of learning to be as old as Xie Juan? Even if it is the same as the knife and piano. It's not a good habit to threaten accounts at every turn. Say, what's the matter?" Jianshu was obviously accustomed to Lu Xian's virtue, and he knew that the matter was urgent, so he did not delay, and said concisely, "The boat capsized on the Cao River." Lu Xian was suddenly shocked, "What ship?" Jianshu said, "Silk boat." Lu Xian's eyes lit up, "When?" Jianshu said, 3 days ago. The news came urgently, and few people in Beijing knew about it. Lu Xian suddenly stroked his palms and laughed, "Okay." Jianshu said, "Mr. said that a while ago, the silk merchants in Beijing united to suppress the price of silk to a very low price, and now the silk boat transporting silk to Beijing on the Cao River has capsized, and the price of raw silk in Beijing will rise. If you can take advantage of the news to buy raw silk at a low price, and when the news spreads, the price of silk will rise, and you can make a lot of money. It's just that the price was lowered a while ago, and many merchants couldn't bear it, and most of them had sold out the raw silk in their hands, but they were afraid that there was not much left in the market." Lu Xian pondered for a while, went through the names of all the big and small businessmen in Beijing in his mind, pulled the corners of his lips and smiled. His eyes were shining, and he only said, "Yes, there is another one." Asterisk. When Su Wenyi saw Yu Fangyan walk in, he was startled by her haggard face. "You haven't slept well for a few days." Yu Fangyan rubbed her eyes and sat down. The guys below immediately brought the tea, and inevitably looked at her with a little worried eyes. This place is a guest room in the Jiangsu and Zhejiang Guild Hall, which was set up here by the merchants of the Jiangsu and Zhejiang Merchants Gang, and specially accommodated the merchants from Jiangsu and Zhejiang provinces who came to Beijing to stay and discuss business. Su Wenyi is a silk merchant in Nangsun, Suzhou. He went to Beijing 2 months ago, but because the big silk merchants in Jiangsu and Zhejiang joined forces to lower the purchase price of raw silk, the silkworm farmers were dissatisfied, and these small and medium-sized merchants who made a living by selling silk could not continue, so they had to force them to go north. Who would have thought that the big businessmen in Beijing and the big businessmen in Jiangsu and Zhejiang are also in cahoots, and there are too many small and medium-sized businessmen in Beijing, and the price of silk does not rise but falls, and it is only half of last year's market price. Not to mention making money, even the cost price paid to silkworm farmers is not enough. Su Wenyi is Chinese New Year's Eve 6 years old today. Even if he doesn't have a beard, he can see some traces of wind and frost on his face, and the corners of his eyes are full of fine wrinkles. Not to mention that the price of silk has not risen for several days. He is stranded in the capital, sleeping today's sleep but not knowing whether the sun will rise tomorrow. He really feels that every day is tormented on the oil pot, and even his eyes are full of a heavy depression and anxiety. His net worth and life are in this business. Last year, the scholar lost a lot of salt. This year from the silkworm farmers to buy silk cannot get the money. Fortunately he is a local businessman in Nangsun, and with the local silkworm farmers for several years, everyone knows that this year's market is not good, but willing to trust him, only received him a deposit. The annual production of raw silk are handed over to his hands. Let him go to Beijing to buy a good price and then go back to pay the balance. In the business field, who doesn't pay with one hand and deliver with the other? But the silkworm farmers in their hometown are willing to give the goods first and then collect the money. Su Wenyi is a conscientious businessman, and he does not want to live up to the trust of the villagers behind him. But God knows how desperate he was when he came to the capital and asked around about the market price of raw silk. Until the 11th day ago, he was stranded in the capital, almost unable to take out the money to live in the hall, and finally felt that he couldn't bear it, and only thought about selling the half of the boat of raw silk in his hand. The price was low, and it didn't hurt to get back how much he could, and bring it back to the township first. As for the part that is not enough, you can only owe it first, and slowly find a way to make up for it. But at this moment, in the midst of such a desperate situation, Yu Fangyan appeared, and then gave him a new hope. This girl was still wearing filial piety when she came that day, and her eyes were red, which startled Su Wenyi, and she thought that something had happened to her to ask for help. Unexpectedly, she took out 400 taels directly from her purse and told him to buy silk. Su Wenyi has also lived for half his life, and he has never seen such a patron. He was stunned for a while, and he couldn't react for a long time, and saw that this girl was really not a rich and noble appearance, nor did she look like a daughter from a merchant family, so he really wondered. He wanted to sell the raw silk so much that he didn't ask too much, so he sold some to her at the market price at the time. It's just that Yu Fangyan is only 400 taels of silver, which is really a drop in the bucket for him to have a boatload of raw silk. After the money was paid, Su Wenyi couldn't hold back the curiosity in his heart, and asked her, now that the price of raw silk in the market is so low, and depending on the situation, it may continue to fall, you are a girl, you don't even understand the account book, and the raw silk of 400 taels of silver is not a small amount, what should you do after you buy it? Yu Fangyan actually replied, wait for half a month to go up before selling. Su Wenyi was shocked at that time, 1,000 thunders roared in his head, and seeing that she was about to leave after answering, she was surprisingly out of shape and chased after her, and even her voice trembled. How dare the girl make such an assertion? The girl from the Yu family looked stunned, as if she was frightened by his hideous face. After a long time, he said straightly, "The person who gave me the money said it." Su Wenyi was even more shocked. The girl has an owner. Yu Fangyan looked at him at that time, as if he thought for a while, and felt that this word was appropriate, so he nodded, "Yes. She told me that with the money, I would buy raw silk today, and sell it in half a month, so that I could make 3 times the profit." Su Wenyi immediately gasped. "Wouldn't that be twice as high as last year's market price and 4 times the current market price? How can the owner of Yu Fangyan dare to say such a thing?" Su Wenyi, who has been in business for many years, realized that he may have inadvertently encountered a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Doing business buys low and sells high, and eats the difference. Prices change with the market, so it's important to be well informed in business. There are people who can grasp the news that others don't know, and they can often be like a fish in water here, and they can catch a good opportunity that the people who are sluggish in the news can't catch in their lifetime. Yu Fangyan, or the owner behind Yu Fangyan, is most likely the person who holds the news. Although he didn't know why he only took out 400 taels of silver to make a voice when he grasped such news, since he encountered this opportunity, Su Wenyi couldn't convince himself to give up no matter what. He wanted to take risks. If the price of silk really rises after half a month, it will be a Jedi for him. If the price of silk does not rise but falls after half a month, where can it fall compared to now, and where can his situation be worse than now? So just take a big gamble. Su Wenyi used the 400 taels of silver paid by Yu Fangyan to light the ferry boats, and also renewed the house money in the hall for half a month, so he simply gave up the idea of selling raw silk at a low price, and asked someone to buy a set of good 4 treasures of the study, connected with an abacus and a few account books that he had used before, and gave them to Yu Fangyan, waiting with her for the day when the price of raw silk would rise. During this period of time, Su Wenyi has also knocked on the side, wanting to ask about the identity of the owner behind her. But Yu Fangyan's mouth was very strict at this time, and he never said it. If asked why the price would rise, Yu Fangyan only said, "I don't know, the owner didn't mention it." At this moment, Su Wenyi sat opposite her, looked at her bloodshot eyes, pinched his fingers to count the time, and finally sighed, "There are only 4 days left." Instead of rising, the price of silk has fallen. Yu Fangyan also just asked the price from the firm, and she knew in her heart, but she was not good at dealing with people, so she didn't know how to reply to this sentence. She was stiff and restrained, holding the teacup tightly with both hands, and drinking tea with her head down. This posture is simply anxious. Su Wenyi smiled bitterly. "Yugu Niang said before that the 400 taels of silver are all your savings, and now that the price of silk has not risen, you are not afraid that this money will be lost. Is the owner to blame?" Yu Fangyan thought for a while, "If I lose, I will save enough and return it to her in the future." Of the 400 taels of silver, 350 taels were given by the second girl. Although she didn't know why the second girl wanted to save herself and why she wanted to give herself money, she could repay the grace of dripping water. In the past 18 years, she has never encountered such a thing, nor has she met such a good person, and I don't know why she looked at her with such tearful eyes at that time. I thought about it for a long time, but I didn't know how to repay it. But the second girl taught her to do business. Then perhaps, after the business is done and a lot of silver is earned, the second girl will be happy when she is held in front of her, right? Su Wenyi didn't know what she thought, and was stunned when he heard this. After a while, she shook her head helplessly. This girl is really dead set on her owner, the money was originally given by the owner, and the matter was also done by the owner, and it was the owner who made money and lost it. How could she say return to him if she lost it? He told someone to bring up the prepared ledger. This is a new ledger for the girl, and I have asked my bookkeeper to mark it, and the girl will seem to be easier and more understanding. However, the girl always stays up late to read the account book, and it is more appropriate to hurt her body. Yu Fangyan learned to get the account book today, and when she took the account book with both hands, she hurriedly thanked her, and said, "Recently, I have been watching the house strictly, and I may not be able to come out in the past few days. If Boss Su doesn't see me after 4 days, please help me sell the raw silk first." Su Wenai said, "Not sooner, not too late, 4 days later, what if it rises again?" Yu Fangyan shook his head. The owner said to sell it at this time. Su Wenai was stunned, and then agreed. After sending Yu Fangyan away, he sat down again and let out a long sigh. The guy behind him frowned, always full of doubts about this matter. "Boss, I look at the girl with a tendon in her head. How do you look like a stupid? With such a good thing, won't her owner do it herself, and it will be our turn?" Su Wenai gritted his teeth, and his eyes were desperate. "The bet is all betting, don't mention it again. I feel that the owner she said is just not a lie. If you lie, you should be decent, and there is no such taboo that you don't mention it." He closed his eyes and opened them again. At this time, there was already a suppressed anger and sadness in his eyes. "Besides, if I really go back with the little silver sold at a low price, how should I face the trust of the silkworm farmers in the township? As soon as the autumn and winter are over, we will prepare mulberry silkworms next year. If I don't have money in my hand, do I want them to eat the northwest wind?" The guy didn't dare to say anything more. Su Wenai calmed down after saying this, and was about to ask him to go out to investigate the situation again, but he didn't expect that the half-open door outside was suddenly knocked, and a scribe stood outside, arched his hand to him in the house, and said, "But Sujo Nangsun, Su Wenai, and Boss Su." Su Wenai felt that he was angry. "Please come in, who are you?" The scribe was naturally Lu Xian, and when he came in and saw that the tea on his table had not been removed, he knew that there was a guest before, but he didn't ask, and directly said his intention. "The surname is Lu, and the single name is a prominent character. I heard that Boss Su has a boatload of raw silk in his hand, but he has not sold it so far. I came here today to do business with you and buy this boat of silk." Su Wenai's heart jumped suddenly, and he didn't even stop breathing, but his face was silent. "What price do you offer?" "Lu Xiandao, it is the market price." Su Wenai couldn't figure out where he came from, so he only said, "The market price is not for sale." Lu Xian raised his eyebrows, and suddenly felt that the situation seemed to be different from what he thought. "Isn't Boss Su's silk unsellable?" Su Wenai said, "I can't sell it now, but there are people like you who come with a lot of money to buy it. Do you know if it won't go up in a few days?" Lu Xian's pupils shrank slightly. He realized that things were not easy, but he smiled. "You seem to know something." At this time, Su Wenai had already dared to be sure that what Yu Fangyan's proprietor said was true. His whole face flushed from the excitement. But his voice still seemed to be neat and tidy, and there were tears in his eyes for a while, and he didn't know whether he was saying to Lu Xiandao or to himself. "Someone came to buy a batch of raw silk from me 11 days ago, and her owner told her that the price would rise. When I saw Boss Lu coming today, I knew that I was right." Asterisk. Bang. Lu Xian kicked open the door of the piano hall. Jian Shu, who was standing on the side, almost drew his sword and slashed at it, and when he saw that it was him, his eyes widened in surprise. Lu Xian walked in with a blue face, picked up the monkey Kuei who had been cold for a while on the tea table, and poured it into his throat, and when he put it down, the teacup smashed on the table with a terrifying sound. On the ground next to the east wall of this piano hall, more than a dozen pieces of wood used for making the piano were neatly arranged, and Xiaowei was standing there with an ink fountain in his hand, dressed in a simple azure straight embellished. He didn't wear a wide-sleeved robe, and pulled his sleeves up to his arms, revealing his bony wrists. When he heard the movement, he turned his head to look. Seeing that it was Lu Xian, his cold long eyebrows wrinkled unconsciously, and said, "Didn't do it." Lu Xian said, "It's half done, but I saw a ghost today." "Xiejuan, tell me honestly, when did the capsizing of the silk boat on the Cao River come out, and when did it first reach the capital, who knows?" Xiaowei turned back to look at the wood. He turned over the piece of paulownia wood in the middle and said, "Didn't Jianshu tell you? 3 days ago, the news just arrived in the capital for less than 2 hours, and the people who knew it were me, Jianshu, and you in addition to the messengers." Lu Xian said categorically, "Impossible. Someone asked Su Wenyi to buy raw silk 11 days ago, and it is expected that the price of silk will rise. I knocked on the side several times, but Su Wenyi didn't say much. But when I came out, I asked someone to inquire about it, and there was a girl who had been in and out of the hall for the past few days, and seemed to be talking about business with him." "Who is this girl?" "A concubine in Qingyuan that no one has ever heard of, is called Yu Fangyan. There seems to be a proprietor behind this girl, but I didn't know who it was. If the boat was on the river 3 days ago, how could this man know about it 8 days in advance?" Xiaowei rubbed his fingers on the paulownia wood board that was going to be selected to make the piano surface, and after listening to Lu Xian's words, he easily found that there was something strange about things. But he didn't ask first, but said, "What did you just say about halfway through?" Lu Xian was almost choked to death by his question, and held his breath before replying, "Su Wenyi is a brain, and he seems to guess that I am not small. After all, the people in the capital who can get this kind of news in the first time can't afford to be offended." He wanted to make a good fate, but he was also afraid that if there was a chance that the price of silk would not rise in a few days, he would not have the money to go back, so at the market price last year, he sold half a boat of silk to me. Xiaowei said, "It's okay. This year, in Jiangsu and Zhejiang, silkworm farmers are miserable, and we are not purely for money, so it doesn't hurt to make less." But Lu Xian is a money fan. He couldn't help but clasp his fingers and knocked on the table. "Xiejuan, you can figure it out, this matter is very serious. If something happens to the silk boat on the Cao River, how can Yu Fangyan, the owner, predict it in advance? If you can let a little Yu Fangyan buy silk, you may not secretly buy more raw silk at a low price. It is very likely that the accident of the silk boat on the Cao River is related to this person. I don't believe in prophets. Either they hit by mistake or had a plan for a long time. No matter whether this person is in the DPRK or in the opposition, I am afraid that he is not a simple person. I can't stop doing it. You must know, who is Yu Fangyan's owner?" Xiaowei wasn't ready to stop there. He was just more concerned about whether it was done or not. At this moment, his face was indifferent, he could neither see joy nor anger, he only lowered his eyes and said, "It is indeed not to be underestimated. I didn't know who this person was, so I asked someone to check the concubine of Nabo's house. This person must have contact with her, and he has some relationship with Kaohe, and he doesn't dare to do things blatantly, so he can't say which petty official is not of high rank. The range is small and easy to look up." Lu Xian also thought so. But it soon became clear that things were not as easy as they thought. Chapter 22, Unworthy. After leaving the hidden pavilion, Yan Lin took her for a while. For example, what gold, silver, and jade, rouge sachets, and even pen, ink, calligraphy, and paintings. When you go to a store, you see a few good things, and you always have to ask her, do you like it? Jiang Xuning hadn't noticed anything at first, but when she saw Yan Lin take another jade rouge and ask her, she had a faint consciousness in her heart. The teenager's expression has always been straightforward. However, at the moment, it seems subtle. When he asked her, do you like it, there was a smile in his eyes, but his eyes were a little evasive, as if he was hiding something for fear of being discovered by her, and there was a touch of shyness that was not obvious. Yan Lin really didn't want her to know. Seeing that September was about to pass, he folded his hands and counted that it would be October, and then his crown in November. As soon as the crown ceremony is over, you can talk about marriage. At that time, he will be able to go to Zhang Mansion to propose marriage, so the dowry list will naturally be prepared in advance. He wants to know what Ning Ning likes and what he doesn't like. If she has something she likes, then she will buy it quietly after today, and put it in the dowry list when she comes back, thinking that she will have a little surprise when she sees it. The young man's heart is really not hidden. When Jiang Xuning didn't see it, he could still say that he liked or disliked it as usual, and only thought that he was asking himself as usual as before, but after seeing it, he said that he didn't like it, and kept saying that it was not good if he didn't like it. She followed him to 2 more shops. Finally, he stopped in front of the third shop that sold zukui noodles and said to Yan Lin, I'm a little tired. Yan Lin raised her eyes and saw that her face was indeed sad. Only then did I realize that I was happy to go shopping alone, but I forgot that she was going to enter the palace tomorrow, and I forgot to ask her if she wanted to stop and rest, and felt a little guilty for a while. It's all my fault, I forgot again. Anyway, there will be a lot of time in the future, and when you enter the palace to read for the princess, I can also come to you. Go back early today, and I'll send you. Jiang Xuning came out in a carriage. Yan Lin was riding a horse, and when she went back, she only slowly followed her car. She occasionally lifted the corner of the curtain, and she could see the golden red afterglow of the sunset falling on the upright figure of the young man, the high bridge of the nose, the corners of the lips with a slight smile, and even the slightly moving eyelashes were stained with light, and when she looked back at her, it was blazing and dazzling. But what opened her heart was sour. Almost. It's time to find a suitable time and make it clear to Yan Lin. Asterisk. After returning home, Jiang Xuning asked someone to move out all her things, and also asked someone to go to the account room in the house to check what things her parents had bought for her in recent years. She doesn't have an account of her own, but she has it in the house. The maids who had been punished for stealing things from her were so frightened that they thought that the second girl was going to start going through old accounts again, and even Wang Xing's family was so frightened that their faces were pale. Jiang Xuning only said, I said that I will not pursue you again, this time it is none of your business, those who should move things, and those who should audit the accounts. The maids and ladies in the house were relieved. In a short time, several boxes were moved out. Jiang Xuning divided the list of valuables on both sides. One side was her own, which was basically added by the house for the courtesy, and on the other hand, Yan Lin had given it over the years, which accounted for the majority. She made a new account book herself, and recorded it clearly. Yanji's home mansion has a great cause and is prominent for a while, but when the Holy Emperor ordered the house, he did not reveal the slightest rumor, and even the night before, the home mansion was still preparing for the crown ceremony of Yan Lin the next day. So once raided the house, he was unprepared. All property was confiscated, it was investigated, and people were directly imprisoned. Even if there are people outside who are trying to dredge up, but there are restrictions on money, and they can't see the Ho yet and the prince. Plus later Jin Yiwei found out that the Yanji Marquis mansion did have a correspondence with the Pingnan Wang's anti-party, and the Holy Thunder was furious, and no one dared to run for the Yanji Marquis mansion. In the end, he remembered that the Ho mansion had served the country and spared the death penalty of extermination. But how depraved was the exile? In the previous life, Yan Lin returned to the court, as if he had changed as a person, with a sense of anger on his body, and rarely laughed again. The fiery teenager she remembered seemed to never exist. Only in the dead of night, when he lay on the bed in her dormitory, gently took her hand, and told her what he saw, heard, experienced, and felt when he was exiled to the northwest boundary. Zhang Xuning could feel that this was Yan Lin. The young man who told her about the magnificence of mountains and rivers when she was young. It's just that the story told is different. When he was young, he was a noble little marquis, fresh clothes, and angry horses. He saw all over the mountains and rivers. He was full of high spirits, and what remained in his eyes were those brilliant and beautiful. After exile, he was not only no longer a noble family, but became a guilty body. And when he went to the bitter cold land, it was the same mountains and rivers, and his eyes were full of depression, and what remained in his memory was the difficult and dangerous world and the changeable hearts of people. Now, God has given her a chance to turn back the long river of the long years, and let her see the sincere and enthusiastic teenager in her memory. She can't reciprocate this love. But if this young man can always be as beautiful as he remembers, how touching would it be? During the day, Yan Lin bought the piano for her and put it on the desk. Zhang Xuning raised her eyes and stared quietly for a long time, and then recorded this piano in the account, and marked a line with small words on the back, 3,000 taels of silver. After the marking, I couldn't hold back a wry smile. Yan Lin, this guy, really spent money without blinking, and couldn't empty her? This piano was bought for 3,000 taels, but when it was time to sell it, I didn't know what it would be discounted into. That Lu Xiao is a real profiteer. Lianer and Tanger didn't know why she suddenly counted things again, but suddenly remembered something, so they came up and said, "By the way, girl, because you were chosen to be the princess's companion, the lord and the wife have rewarded a lot of things." In the afternoon, the eldest girl also sent a set of 4 treasures of the study. "Do you want to take a look? Do you want to order some too?" Zhang Sui. She looked over to Lianer. Lake pen, inkstone, pine smoke ink, and a knife of paper are all excellent things. So there was silence for a while, and he just said, "Let it go." Asterisk. Zhang Xunning's announcement that she was summoned to the palace to become the princess's companion naturally caused a lot of discussion in Jiang's mansion. After all, she has a pampered temperament and does not study well. No matter how you look at it, she is far from the eldest lady Zhang Sui. But in the end, the list turned out to be her. At the beginning, the name of the eldest lady was passed down in the house, and no one expected such an unexpected situation. All of a sudden, there were all kinds of things. Some said that the palace might have made a mistake, some said that Zhang Xunningba befriended the princess, and used some means to make the princess cross out Zhang Sui's name and give her the opportunity. Some said that she went to the lord's side in private to make trouble, and forced the lord to change it to her before submitting the candidate, and some said that Zhang Sui was not qualified enough, so the palace didn't look down on it. But anyway, the words didn't reach Zhang Xunning's ears. She didn't care. They are going to enter the palace early tomorrow morning, although Zhang Boyu and Meng Shi also feel that the result this time is really confusing, but they still put a meal in the house in the evening and called Zhang Sui and Zhang Xuning to use it together. This is the first time Zhang Xuning has seen Zhang Sui after the palace companion was elected. It looks no different than usual. Is still dignified and virtuous in the past, and she will take the initiative to cook for her parents during the banquet, and there is no injustice or loss between her eyebrows, as if this incident has never happened, and she has not heard any gossip outside. Zhang Boyu was worried, and he really didn't have much hope for Zhang Xuning to enter the palace this time, so he only told him earnestly, "My father is an official in the court, and his political achievements will be compromised. After you enter the palace, you don't need to fight for anything, as long as you are good, control your temper, and don't cause trouble. As for whether the princess likes it or not, it doesn't matter if the gentlemen like it or not. It's just a matter of being able to barely pass it through. Don't forget, watch more and talk less, just bury your head in things." Zhang Xuning responded one by one. But what she thought in her heart was, entering the palace tomorrow and starting to learn etiquette, Zhang Boyu really doesn't have to worry so much. After all, if the plan of passive sabotage goes well, I am afraid that she will not be able to pass the etiquette and qualification level, and she will be able to go home early. Zhang Boyu looked at her casually. He was really a little worried. He didn't say anything more, but he was thinking in his heart, when the court goes down tomorrow, I want to find Juan to say a few words, and ask him to take care of it in the palace. Meng Shi was still worried about the unexpected change in the selection of companion readers. His face was not very good during the banquet. He glanced at Zhang Xuning several times, and wanted to ask her if she had done anything in the middle, but Zhang Boyu gave her a look next to her, so she didn't ask. When I confessed, I only had to deal with 2 sentences. After all, the real words were all lobbied by Zhang Bo, and he didn't say a few words to Zhang Xuning from beginning to end. A meal was eaten until 3 o'clock before it was dispersed. When I came out of the main house, the house was already lit up. Zhang Xuning came out of the salute with Zhang Suiwai, so walking on the porch, it was normal for one to be in front and one in the back. If it was usual, they went away like this. But today, Zhang Xuning stopped her and said lightly, "I don't like what you sent." Zhang Suiwai stopped and didn't look back. Sister Ning threw it away. Zhang Xuning laughed sarcastically, "If I were you, my name would have been submitted, but I would have been defeated, but my sister who had no learning and no skills was selected as a companion, and I must have to think about whether I was being tricked. You are hypocritical, and you want to give me pen, ink, paper, and inkstone. Do you think I can't see that you actually want to enter the palace?" Zhang Suiwai finally turned her eyes to look at her. The porch was full of wisteria flowers, but the flowering season had passed early, and it was already late autumn, and the flowers and leaves withered, and the branches were sparse, so the frosty moonlight above her head fell from the cracks between the branches, and flowed to her in small pieces. The simple moon-white dress is beautiful and charming when standing there. Even the sarcastic smile at the corner of his lips has a moving gesture. Her joy and anger are not hidden, and she seems to disdain to hide them. Zhang Suiwai actually felt a little envious, and said slowly, "I want to enter the palace. What woman in the world has never loved prosperity? It's just that in the end, it doesn't work out, and there's nothing to complain about. Everything has its fate, and now I have neither the ability nor the fate." Zhang Xuning couldn't get used to her calm expression when she spoke. The smile on her lips gradually disappeared, but the ridicule in her voice was even stronger. "Do you know why I don't like you as soon as I enter the mansion?" Zhang Suiwai didn't speak. Zhang Xuning broke a small dry branch hanging down from the corridor, and made a snap sound. In this silent night, there was a different kind of shock. "It's not just because you are better than me, and enjoy everything I should enjoy. What's more, after 4 years, you know both your own background and who your biological mother is. But you have never asked me for a word, not even a word." Zhang Suiwai's palms folded in front of her slowly tightened, and she lowered her eyes slightly, as if she had something to say. But after all, he didn't say it, Jiang Xuning threw away the withered branch casually and smiled at her. Before Wan Yang was seriously ill, she took my hand and stuffed her heirloom bracelet into my hand. Let me go back to the house, and when I saw you, I handed it over to you. But I never gave it to you. Because I feel like you don't deserve it. Chapter 23, Entering the Palace. After saying this, Jiang Xuning didn't care what her expression was, turned around and left. Many times she couldn't tell what kind of feelings she had for Wan Niang. But all the tragedies in her last life, in the final analysis, are related to Wan Niang. It stands to reason that she should hate her. But as long as she thought of the daughter she was thinking about in her heart, she never asked her, and she felt that Wan Yang was hateful and pitiful after all. In the last life, Jiang Xuning robbed Jiang Suiwei of the opportunity, and also robbed her marriage, and squeezed into the palace to read Shenzai by herself. Everything doesn't seem to be much different from the previous one. This made her wonder if she could really change anything when she was reborn in this life, or maybe she was just repeating the mistakes of the previous life. Asterisk. Early the next morning, before dawn, Jiang Xuning was waited by the maids and got up, dressed up and went to say goodbye to her parents, took a little luggage, and got into the carriage. The ministers entered and exited the palace from the noon gate. The ladies of the palace or those who entered the palace as they did enter the palace to read with them all entered through the Zhenshun gate in the northeast corner of the palace. Most of the selected companions are between 17 and 20, and they are the best age for young girls. When Jiang Xuning arrived, some people had already arrived. She seldom appeared at the gatherings of the ladies of the family, and was not familiar with them, but they were familiar with each other, and were standing near the palace gate and talking in a low voice. But as soon as the carriage of the Jiang mansion arrived, the discussion stopped. Everyone turned to look at her. There was more or less curiosity or jealousy in his eyes. Zhang Fu presented the name Jiang Suiwei at the beginning, but then he was selected to enter the palace as a companion and suddenly became Jiang Xuning. This matter is not only known in Jiang's mansion, but also outside the outside world. Who cannot pay attention to these girls from a big family like them? Others can't grab their heads. This Jiang Xuning is good, sitting at home, there is nothing to do, and the pie falls from the sky and smashes her head. It's really hard to calm down. Jiang Xuning got off the carriage and saw a few familiar faces at a glance. They were really the same people who had been with her in the previous life. Auu of Qingyuan-24. At the Chongyang banquet that day, Jiang Xuning didn't give her face, which can be regarded as a grudge. At this moment, she was wearing a beautiful palace dress and looked dignified and virtuous, but the eyes that looked at her were undisguised hostility, and even faintly poisonous. Jiang Xuning said in her heart that she must not come to her to look for death, otherwise the situation of entering the palace in this life will be much better than in the previous life. If a temper comes up and accidentally pinched her to death, it will not sound good to spread out. Next to Yu is Fan Yulan, the young lady of Fan Changshu of the Ministry of Rites who was named the first in the poem at the last Chongyang banquet. She is the most plainly dressed among everyone. She didn't even wear an earring, and there was an indifferent and ethereal air between her eyebrows. The matter of entering the palace didn't seem to be exciting to her. Others looked at Jiang Xuning's gaze a little strangely, but Fan Yulan just looked at it lightly, neither curious nor jealous. Jiang Xuning knew that this was the only one among the 12 people who entered the palace this time who did not yearn for glory and wealth, and in the end he did not stay to accompany him. The second is Zhou Baoying, the third girl of the Ding Yuanhou family, who is the youngest of all and the pearl of Ding Yuanhou's favor. A small face is still a little baby fat, round, with a pair of big black grape-like eyes, very bright. People stood in front of the palace gate and looked around, not afraid at all. The white and tender hand was still holding a small oiled paper bag, and kept taking out candied fruit from it to eat, and the cheeks moved like a little hamster, staring at Jiang Xuning with blinking. This is a girl who can take it if she gives her any snack. But there's also a bit of a bad thing. That is, whoever gives her snacks can take her in. It's about people who are still young, ignorant, and completely unprincipled. The remaining few are Yao Rongrong, Fang Miao, and 3 others. The 3 Jiang Xuning looked at the eyes, and they were no longer impressed. Because they all seemed to have bad etiquette and academic qualifications, they were withdrawn by the female officials in the palace in the few days after entering the palace to learn the rules and be familiar with the palace environment. I remember some of the first 2. A Yao Rongrong, who was the lowest born among the people who entered the palace this time, was the daughter of Yao Duping, the attendant of the Hanlin Academy, and the appearance of the small family Jasper, compared to several other girls from everyone's background, it was a little shabby. When looking at people, they are also pleasing to the eye. When she looked over, as soon as she touched Jiang Xuning's gaze, she immediately withdrew her gaze, not daring to look at her again. Jiang Xuning remembered Yao Rongrong because she was the stupidest and slowest learner among all the people in her previous life. In the end, it's a recipe. A delicate face, clean, a pair of smart eyes, but a little too lively. There is a small red mole on the tip of her eyebrows, which makes her look a little delicate. If you look closely, you will see that she is wearing an aqua blue dress today. Because September is cold among the 5 elements, the temperature of Les Yin is moist and flowing, and it grows with water. That's right, Fang Miao is the only daughter of Qin Tian Jianzheng. Since she was a child, she learned from her father to observe the celestial phenomena and calculate the solar terms, and while sinking in the study of the 5 elements and gossip, she will also show people divination. Whether it is accurate or not, Jiang Xuning doesn't know. Anyway, in the previous life, Fang Miao was very liked by other people because of his hobby in this area, and he would get together at every turn at night to calculate some kind of marriage blessing and misfortune, and he was like a fish in water. Jiang Xuning didn't care what kind of eyes they used to look at themselves, because her plan in this life was very clear. Learn etiquette. If a person cannot wake up a person who pretends to be asleep, then no matter how good a female official is, she will not be able to teach a person who is bent on staying away from the court. She didn't bother with these people. So after getting off the bus, I didn't talk to them, so I made a stop at the gate of the palace from a short distance. The eunuch guarding the door glanced at her, pinched his fingers and calculated, and said, "There are 9 people, and there are still 3 missing, please wait a while, and the slave family can take you into the palace later." Then Yao Rongrong asked timidly, "Who hasn't come yet?" Zhou Baoying lowered her head and pulled the candied fruit in her oil paper bag, pouted, and replied casually, "The latest one to come must be Sister Xiao, Sister Chen, and Sister Yao are with her, they must come together." There was a subtle strangeness on the faces of the others for a moment. Zhou Baoying is the concubine of the home mansion, and she has always been close to Xiao Shu and others, and she is simple-minded, so she doesn't feel anything wrong with saying such things. But the other people's lineage is difficult to compare with theirs. Now most people are waiting here, but no one has come. Who doesn't think that the shelves that haven't come yet are too big? But as he was talking, a carriage that looked quite extravagant drove far towards the Zhenshun gate and stopped in front of everyone. The driver took the footstool from the car and put it down. The eunuch who had spoken to Jiang Xuning and the others before hurriedly got up to the carriage as soon as he saw it, put on a smile on his face, and bowed to the side of the carriage. "The eldest lady is here." It was really Xiao Shu in the car. She was wearing an apricot yellow wide-sleeved Liuxian skirt today, with a ring on her waist, and she got out of the car with the hand handed over by the eunuch, and said with a smile, "Today, it was Gong Gong Huang who came out to pick up people, and the eldest princess didn't say anything to tell me." Huang Renli also smiled, "Your Highness is very happy to know that there are many playmates coming this time. Today, I sent the slave family to come, so I can take a look at it, and I will tell the princess when I go back." Everyone heard that this Huang Renli was the eunuch next to the eldest princess of Liang, and he was very trusted by the eldest princess. But such a eunuch also stepped forward to help Xiao Shu get out of the car. The prominence of the Xiao family and the good relationship between Xiao Shu and the eldest princess can be seen. Xiao Shu was not alone in the car. After she got out of the car, 2 more people got out of the car. Zhang Xuning looked at it and raised up her eyebrows slightly. The young lady of the Chen Yunjin family, a cabinet scholar, Chen Shiyi, although she rarely enters the palace and is not very familiar with the eldest princess of Liang, has an excellent relationship with Xiao Shu. It's just because the 2 of them are from the same background in Beijing. Although his appearance is not as bright as Xiao Shu, he is as bright as his name, he has a dignified and elegant atmosphere, and there is always a faint smile on his lips. The rest of the one is interesting. The person has apricot eyes and willow eyebrows, a single screw bun, a pair of white jade earrings in the shape of a crescent moon on his ears, and a delicate jade lock on his chest. Looks good looking, and looks at the dress to know that the background is not ordinary. It's just that when she got out of the car, the official lady frowned, faintly irritable, and even a little gloomy, as if she had encountered something difficult to solve and unpleasant. Zhang Xuning was too impressed by her. The daughter of Mrs. Yao, the secretary of the ministry, Yao Shi, almost married Zhang Xia as his wife, but when the marriage was halfway through the discussion, he regretted this family business, and also made people spread the rumors of Zhang Xia's wife all over the capital, and asked her father to suppress it in the court, so angry that Zhang Xia's elderly mother Feng Shi fell seriously ill. As a result, after thousands of choices, she married Zhou Yunzi. Since then, he has let his mother's family help Zhou Yunzi and has been helping him all the way. Unexpectedly, only 3 years later, because of difficult childbirth, he died in Zhou Yunzi's mansion with a group of wives and concubines. At this time, Yao Shi should be discussing marriage with Zhang Xia, and worrying about this matter, right? After all, Zhang Shike fought with Jin Yiwei. No matter how you look at it, it doesn't look like you have a good future. Zhang Xuning also somehow, although she knew that her previous life was not a good thing, but the means were really not as good as this. She looked up and down, left and right, but she didn't feel very happy to see Yao Shi. Abandoned Zhang Xia and chose Zhou Yunzi. I'm really a little blind to these beautiful eyes. Her gaze was calm and meaningful, just staring at Yao Shi like this. Yao Shi got out of the car and was looking up at the others, but inadvertently bumped into Zhang Xunning's eyes. His gaze stopped, and he was stunned. Zhang Xuning pulled the corners of her lips abruptly, stood next to everyone, showed a bright smile to her, hid the sharpness and ridicule of Fang Cai, and seemed to have a good impression of her, very friendly, and nodded in greeting. Yao Shi was confused. But if a good-looking person like Zhang Xuning smiled at others, even a woman couldn't resist it, although she didn't know why, she couldn't help but smile back subconsciously. Zhang Xuning was pure and kind on the face, but she pondered leisurely in her heart. In her previous life, she didn't know Zhang Xia at this time, and she didn't pay attention to Yao Shi. But in this life, this girl must not be a demon under her nose. Otherwise, there are some things that she may not be able to endure and stand by. Chapter 24 Differential Treatment. 12 of them were all here. Xiao Shu is undoubtedly the invisible leader in this group of people, and as soon as she came over, everyone's eyes fell on her, and in addition to envy, there was also some fear and surrender. Many people also took the initiative to say hello to her. Xiao Shu is not ambiguous, she should pass a little bit, but it is the same for everyone. Only when she saw Zhang Xuning, the corners of her lips hooked slightly. At this time, Zhang Xuning had not yet saluted her, but she nodded to her from a distance. It was a greeting, it seemed to be quite friendly, and there was a faint sense of agreement with some people. If I had changed people, I would have been flattered a long time ago. But Xiao Shu's attitude fell on Zhang Xunning's eyes, but she still carried a kind of natural aristocratic condescension, not to express friendship equally, but because she felt that she could enter the eyes of the eldest princess, so she could be regarded as her eyes, but she would not really take her seriously. Xiao Shu is such a temperament. From a prominent background, what others have dreamed of all their lives is what she has had since she was a child. There's very little you can't get it. This makes her extremely calm in the face of everything and everyone, and even when facing the royal family, she can remain neither humble nor arrogant. For anyone who is not a threat to her, even if they are very rude to her, she can talk and laugh and never get angry. For all those who are under her are not qualified to speak to her. Only when she felt that someone was threatening her would she show her fangs. Zhang Xuning fought with her in her last life. When she didn't become the queen back then, she still coaxed Shenju with all her heart, although Shenju may not really like her in her heart, but men, who doesn't like beautiful women to coax? So she was favored during that time. But when Shenju ascended the throne, Zhang Xuning became the queen, and achieved her goal. She didn't bother to coax Shenju anymore. It happened that Xiao Shu entered the palace not long after, and she simply let the people in the harem compete for favor, and she was happy to let the emperor rest in Xiao Shu's palace, and she didn't have to wait. She only took charge of the Phoenix Seal in Cunning Palace, and she was her own queen wholeheartedly, and she didn't live too comfortably. Until one day, Xiao Shu was pregnant and named the imperial concubine, and Shenju also asked him to assist in the sixth palace. Zhang Xuning finally began to panic. Or rather, start to get angry. It turns out that after becoming a queen, it does not mean that you will be a queen for the rest of your life. There are so many people in the harem, there will always be some capable ones. Especially Xiao Shu, who was born in a big family, the support given by the mother family is extremely strong, and he has the ability, he is very competitive, and he is used to being a master all his life, but I am afraid that it is difficult to be satisfied with just an imperial concubine, and it is difficult to tolerate that there are others above him. And so the battle began. Although Zhang Xunning's relationship with her mother's family is not very good, it is a combination of honor and disgrace. Zhang Boya was the new secretary of the household department at that time, and he can be regarded as a good speaker in the court. She also has Zhou Yinzi, who had already controlled most of the Jinyi guards at that time, ruthless and reliable. And what is very interesting is that the Xiao family has an eldest son who is outcast, named Xiao Dingfei, who has just been recovered in those 2 years, and is the son of Qinquo who can inherit the title seriously, and is also Xiao Shu's half-brother. Nothing else, the temperament of the prodigal disciple is well known in the government and the opposition, and he is a gangster who is not stingy, and he is very sought after by Zhang Xuning, and he can be called a condescending person. For her sake, Xiao Dingfei couldn't be so angry that Qinquo Gong was angry, and he didn't give Xiao Shu's sister face at all. It was completely a good knife used by Zhang Xuning to stimulate Qinquo's mansion. So when she fought with Xiao Shu and Qinquo mansion, she really didn't fall behind. At most the battle situation was a little stalemate. Later, Xia Wei took action to bring down the Xiao family, and she clapped her hands and said that she was fast for a while. Of course, not for long. Because at most, less than half a year has passed, Xie Wei has taken another action to bring down the royal family, and the entire government and the opposition are under control, and Zhang Xuning, the queen, is finally no longer beautiful. It's really a play of snipe and clam fight, fisherman wins. Although she and Xiao Shu's fate was not good, and in the end, they were both involved in the court situation and fell into Xie Wei's hands, she should have some sympathy for this former opponent. But that's not the case at all. Although Xie Wei is a devil wearing the skin of a saint, it does not mean that Xiao Shu is a good person, let alone that she has to share the same hatred with Xiao Shu. On the contrary, Zhang Xuning still doesn't like her very much in this life, and is afraid of her. Facing Xiao Shu taking the initiative to say hello, she lowered her eyes and thought for a moment, only bowed her head lightly and returned the salute, still not very enthusiastic. Xiao Shu's eyes were a little more scrutinizing. But soon her attention was diverted, because Huang Renli had already counted the number of people, called a few palace people to carry things for them, and after checking the waist cards, he led them all the way into the palace, and introduced them to the surrounding palaces on the way. Huang Renli knew that this group was all young ladies from your family, and there were also friends of Her Royal Highness the eldest princess, and there were also people who Her Royal Highness the eldest princess was very interested in, plus her voice was feminine, so she spoke as soft and warm as a spring breeze. This time, all the young ladies live in Yang's Hizai. It took a lot of effort for His Highness to prepare for this reading, and this Yang's Hizai was originally a place for the prince to study. It's just that there is no prince in the palace now, and just when the ladies came in, they went to the royal supervisor to replace the furnishings and plant some flowers and trees suitable for enjoyment. When I went back to live in one room, it was also spacious. This place is next to the Fengchen Palace, and the lectures are in the Fengchen Palace, which is very close. To the north, the 6 palaces where the harem ladies live, and to the south, you can look at the Wenhua Hall and Wenzhou Pavilion in the distance. It is very convenient for gentlemen to give lectures to Her Royal Highness the Princess and the ladies. It's just that after all, at the edge of the inner court, a little closer to the outer court, if the ladies are afraid of accidentally meeting someone, they can only be a little more careful and move less. Although the defense of men and women in this dynasty is not so serious, there are also some mansions with very strict rules who care about these things, and they don't even let their own girls see any foreign men. Zhang Xuning didn't care. But some of the other girls in the group nodded approvingly. Zhang Xuning scoffed. Yang's Hizai is not too convenient for her in the previous life. It is close to the Wenhua Palace, and some gentlemen can come to give lectures to the princess after giving lectures to the emperor's ministers and ministers. Similarly, people like Yan Lin and Shen Zhu who listen to Mr. lecturing can also sneak over. Sometimes I met Xie Wei to talk about some books, and other grandchildren and brothers of the king asked the emperor to show them, and they set up a screen and sat outside to listen. That's just hooking up with whoever you want. The Yang's Hizai in this life is also the same as in the previous life. Even the position of the 2 newly planted laurel trees under the palace wall is not different, because they used to be the princes who lived with them, so they are very elegant and simple, and there is a bit of the atmosphere of the library, and it is a place to learn at a glance. The young lady of the family, who is used to being rich at home, may not feel how good it is. But someone like Yao Rongrong who came from a small family was surprised, and he wanted to praise the grandeur of the palace, but when he turned his head and saw that everyone else had a flat expression, he was about to speak, so he quietly swallowed it back. Huang Renli said, "This place has been cleaned, but you young ladies may have to discuss which room to live in. After you have chosen a place to live, you will clean up a little, and several female officials from the Shanghai Bureau will come to teach the etiquette in the palace. The ladies have to brace themselves to deal with it, because Su Shangai will also come to see it in person. She has been in the palace for many years, and she has been serving Her Royal Highness the eldest princess in her early years, so it can be said that she has watched Her Royal Highness the princess grow up, and she is very strict in terms of etiquette. If you can't pass her level, I'm afraid that even if you come to this palace, you will inevitably have to go home. Su Shangai. As soon as Jiang Xuning heard this name, she felt like a reflex, only to feel that her knees, back, neck, and even her fingers began to ache faintly. In her previous life, she grew up in the countryside and never liked to learn the rules. After returning to the capital, he relied on Yan Linyu to be unrestrained. As a result, as soon as she entered the palace, she hid her hand. And Su Shangai grew up serving Shen Zai, and I don't know if it was because she was unhappy for the princess, or because she was shown by Shen Zai, she was extremely strict with her, and she was repeatedly tossed, and if she was not careful, she would have to start all over again. At this time, it is especially embarrassing. Because everyone has learned, they all stand by and watch her laugh, and their eyes are inevitably strange, pointing at her. Many of the ladies of the family who came to read today had deliberately inquired about the situation in the palace, and they had obviously heard of this Master Su of the Shanghai Bureau, and they all showed a little fear. This led to everyone quietly talking about the room when they were choosing a room. Su Shanghai, I know, it's very scary. My mother said when she left this morning that it was best for me not to touch her. However, Huang Gonggong said that there would be a few female officials, so it should be taught separately, right? If I really meet Su Shangai, what should I do, Wu? Yes, is it so scary? This room faces south, the window opens on the west side, and the outside is right facing the laurel tree, so you should be able to meet a nobleman. I'll choose this room, and none of you should rob me of it. Old man bless, choosing this room will enable me to get through this difficult time smoothly. Jiang Xuning didn't compete with them for a particularly good room, but simply picked the most secluded one in the most corner, but at the same time the lighting was not very good, just listening to the sound of talking from behind, they could know who was who. Always speak with a suffix such as cluck and ot, and the one with a sweet voice is Zhou Baoying. The one who was timid was Yao Rongrong. Shinto Dao chooses a room, and he has to mumble for a long time to count the Fang Miao who can be counted as half a god. The others didn't talk much. It didn't take long to choose. Everyone very tacitly left the best one to Xiao Shu, Chen Shiyi, and Yao Shi's rooms were just on both sides of her, the others were scattered at random. Jiang Xuning's room was the most side, so there was only one room next to the east, and the location was not very good, so Fan Yulan, who didn't care much about accompanying the reading, chose it. After choosing, they each went in and packed their own. Jiang Xuning brought the least amount of things, and after sorting it out casually, she packed it up, and when she came out, she thought she would be the first. Who would have thought that when he raised his eyes, Fan Yulan was already sitting outside. Seeing her come out, Fan Yulan nodded to her, and I don't know if she felt that Jiang Xuning looked down on these things as much as herself, so she rarely showed a smile and smiled at her. Indeed, it is like a hollow valley orchid blooming. Although it is not a national color and natural fragrance, it has its own elegant and dusty atmosphere. Jiang Xuning estimated that this Miss Fan might have misunderstood that she was her colleague, but it was not easy to explain this wonderful misunderstanding, so she simply accepted the other party's kindness and smiled. The two of them did not speak, but sat outside and waited. After a little half an hour, everyone was packed up one after another. At this time, there was a rumor outside, saying that the female officials from the Shanghai Bureau had come to teach the rules, and almost all the palace maids inside and outside Yang's his eye stood up straight, bowed their heads, held their breath and concentrated, and did not make any more sound. Everyone was shocked by the momentum. Immediately afterwards, I saw 4 female officials walking outside the palace gate. The one who started was wearing a grey-blue 5-rank female official uniform, with her hair curled high, and 2 rouille moire golden hairpins installed, and her hands folded in front of her waist and abdomen, but they were not really attached to her waist. During the walk, he was rigorous and clean, and the distance taken by each step was exactly the same. A somewhat elderly face could not see half a smile, the corners of the eyes were wrinkled, and the eyebrows also had a shallow, wrinkled vertical mark because of the frequent frowning, and when the gaze swept over everyone, it was cold and fierce, and there was no temperature. The timid of the 12 immediately bowed their heads in fright. Only Xiao Shu, Chen Shiyi, and Fan Yulan could bow calmly and calmly. Xiao Shu and Chen Shiyi often enter the palace and have long learned etiquette. Fan Yulan looked at everyone the same, so she didn't think Su Shanghai was terrible. When Su Shanghai saw this, her brows furrowed, she walked in front of everyone and stood still, and said without a voice, "Today, Shanghai Bureau was ordered to teach you some etiquette in the palace for 2 days. Ladies and gentlemen, you can call me Su Shanghai. In the future, everyone will read for Her Royal Highness the eldest princess, and you must be extra cautious. So I hope everyone will take it seriously in the past 2 days, if anyone slacks off or really can't learn, they will invite someone to leave the palace and return home." Huang Renli had already said something that meant something before, but everyone didn't think anything about it, but when these words came out of Su Shanghai's mouth, everyone trembled in their hearts and shuddered. Su Shanghai saw that they all listened, so she said, "Now please divide the young ladies into 3 groups by yourself, and the 3 female officials will teach separately in a while, and they can also guide them thoroughly." Everyone bowed in unison and said, "Yes." Then Su Shanghai sat aside. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief when they saw it. It seems that this most demanding and terrifying Lord Shanghai should not come to guide them in person. But when it comes to self-grouping, it is quite subtle. Xiao Shu, Chen Shiyi, and Yao Shi came in the same carriage when they came, so they were naturally together. Yu Yu looked left and right, and actually stepped forward to pull Fan Yulan, and walked to Zhou Baoying, who was about to go to Xiao Shu's side, and said to her with a smile, "I wanted to know Baoying in the past, can we be together?" Zhou Baoying thought about it, and felt that it didn't matter, so she nodded. Zhang Xuning stood still and didn't move, but she was wondering who she was better with in this life. In the last life, she was so strong, and she was with Zhou Baoying. As a result, I was unlucky to meet Su Shanghai, and I was tossed so that I didn't look like a person. In this life, although she originally planned to release the water, she was not prepared to let herself pass safely, but if she bumped into Su Shanghai again, the matter of leaving the palace would be 9 times out of 10, but she would also be tossed enough. She still hadn't figured it out. When it comes to choosing who to be with, you must look at the potential. A divine voice suddenly sounded not far behind her. Zhang Xuning turned her head and saw that it was Fang Miao walking towards her. A pair of smart and lively eyes were staring at her shrewdly. One hand had already put on Zhang Xuning's shoulder, and said with a smile, "Second Miss Zhang has a very good momentum recently, and the light is also bright. I feel that if I can be with you, I will be able to borrow a little bit of momentum and get a little light. So, I'm with second Miss Zhang." The last word bar suddenly froze. Fang Miao originally inquired that Zhang Xuning was the only one who did not present his name but ended up on the companion list, and he also got the blue eyes of the eldest princess of Liang at the Chongyang banquet. This time he entered the palace only because he was the first person that Her Royal Highness the eldest princess cared about besides Xiao Shu, so she wanted to work with her, so it would be easier to mix with her, and let the eldest princess notice her chances. But she inadvertently swept the corner of her eye, and saw Su Shanghai standing up again. Not only stood up, but also walked towards Zhang Xuning. "Oh my grandma!" Fang Miao's eyelids jumped wildly, and all kinds of words that were close to Zhang Xuning's before he could say were swallowed back into his stomach, and with a slight turn of his fingers, he turned in a circle, pointing at Fan Yulan's side. "Hey, it doesn't seem to be good over there." After speaking, he raised the palm that was originally on Zhang Xuning's shoulder, smoothed the folds of the fabric on her shoulder, and said, "Then I'll go over here, Zhang Er's girl, don't think about me." Then he ran to Fan Yulan's side with a cigarette. For a while, everyone looked at her with a kind of pity, and Yu suddenly laughed with a task, only to say that Zhang Xuning was arrogant in their mansion in the past, and today she is finally going to be unlucky. This kind of person should be treated well. Fell into the hands of Su Shanghai, and if she didn't die, she would be asked to shed her skin. Zhang Xuning realized that something seemed to be wrong. Then he heard a cold voice behind him, "Second Miss Zhang." Zhang Xuning stiffened, turned around, and saw Su Shanghai standing behind him at some point. Looking at this expressionless face, she felt pain all over. "In my heart, I only said that I couldn't escape Su Shanghai in this life, but at best, Su Shanghai was strict. As long as she showed her pampered temper and opportunistic inferiority, she would probably be able to get out of the palace. Bow now." But she never expected that the next moment, Su Shanghai's unsmiling face would evoke a slight smile. It's not obvious, but it's a world of difference. At this moment, not only Zhang Xuning, but all the other people who were gloating or just about to watch the joke were all dumbfounded, unable to believe what they were seeing. The iron tree is blooming. The sun is coming out in the west. Su Shanghai actually laughed. She should not be used to laughing, so she looked a little stiff and disobedient, and only looked at Zhang Xuning at the moment, and even her voice was softer than before, and she only said, "Second Miss Zhang is the first time to enter the palace, right?" Zhang Xuning. "Wait, isn't there something wrong? Everyone else? What about treating everyone equally and being extremely strict?"